How many of you in this room, if you are honest, because that's what we want to be right now, are tired? Look at that. How many of you, okay, so that's like sleepy time. How many of you are weary? Like just, yeah. Especially, when I asked, if I was in your house in the morning on Monday, and I said, how many of you are weary? Well, then everybody would say, me. Monday, trying to get my wife out of bed is, well, it's an adventure. And, I don't have an eject button on our bed yet, but, she always says, you're always so mean to me in the morning, on Monday morning. Get up. I'm ready to go because I have to get up to take the dog out. So she just, the neighbors can't see her not ready, even if it's just taking the dog out in the morning. So anyway. But if you're weary or tired, I think that this is the message for you, that you begin to go, oh man, I am so just beat down and wore down and wore out. So if you got a Bible, open up to Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11. Jesus is really going through some difficult teachings, going through some things. He gets through some woes, some punishments coming. And then he gets down to the end of the chapter, and it's really quite interesting that he kind of switches gears a little bit in verse 28. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, he says this. He says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. All of you take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." And I just read those verses and go, wow, why am I not getting that? Why am I so weary? And what is up with that? And so I have to ask myself, what is he talking about? Where is he going with this? Well, I was thinking about the things, and of course you know that it's been an ongoing object lesson on the car over here. Let's turn the light on so we can see. But on the car, last week, for instance, we talked about forgiveness, and you heard that forgiveness is not merely just taking some spray paint and spraying it over the top of the rust and all that, and whoever swept the floor and mopped the floor, I just messed it up for him again. But it takes some work. It takes God to begin to strip away all the old stuff and put a coat on it, and he begins to cover you. And it's a real understanding of, this is what happens when you kind of fake forgiveness. Oh, God, I'm sorry. It's not really doing anything. That's what happens when you are very serious and allow God to do what he needs to do in your life and install repentance as a part of that. And today I thought it would be fun to talk about the suspension on a car. Now right here you have these leaf springs. This is a suspension. If you can't see, well, you know. It's one of those least appreciated areas of a car, Some of you grew up in an era, you're a little bit older perhaps, and Buick has it nailed to a T where it's floaty. I don't like riding in cars that are floaty because that means I'm old. And I don't like that floating on a thing of air, feeling like you're just riding along. And I remember going to Florida a couple of years ago. We had rented a car. We got there, and I had a choice. We could get I don't know how the upgrade was to a Ford Escape, but whatever. So it was a Ford Escape or a Grand Marquis. Now, some of you sitting here would go, man, I'd go for the Grand Marquis. Well, not me, because I was thinking, we are in Fort Myers, Florida. Everybody here drives a Grand Marquis. How would I find my car at Walmart? I wouldn't know. So we got the Ford Escape. What I really needed was something with another back seat to keep my children separated. But, it worked out, and it was fine. A little more economical maybe on the gas. But that Grand Marquis, everybody and their brother had one of them. And Stephanie's like, oh, that's just, we're leaving. And she's like, why didn't you get the Grand Marquis? It has a bigger trunk and blah, blah, blah. It's a bigger car. And I just started pointing cars out as we were driving along. And you start going, why? What's so great about it? Floaty. You don't even think about it. It's just riding along, and it just does its thing. It runs and it drives, but the suspension's one of those things that if you're young like I was years ago, that you wanted to update. So I had a nice little front-wheel drive car, and I thought, hey, it'd be great to update the springs. Needed to replace the shocks anyway. Let's do some springs, and I put some, well, let's just say they were race-tuned springs, and it had 10-way adjustable, actually, shocks in them. They were set to hard, And number 10 was kidney transplant. And so you would set them, and I probably would set them on 5 or something like that. And in the back and front, I think there were 4 settings. And I just know that Maya used to call it the bumpy car because, but it handled great. It was a great handling car. And in fact, when Stephanie was pregnant with Cole, I'm pretty sure it was Cole because Cole was late, and we were trying to induce labor. So I just got out in the car and I set all the shocks to full stiff and drove down the bumpiest road I could find. And at the time in Sun Prairie, the bumpiest road in town was Thompson Drive. It was terrible. And I don't know why. It was almost like they had speed bumps installed in the road. And you would just drive, and it was just like punishing. And I'm driving like a maniac. I'm driving fast. And we're trying to get this thing going. Come on, Cole. And he didn't want out. So it didn't really work. But it was punishing ride. But it handled great. And the job of the suspension is to put all of the traction of your car to the road. And all of the power, it's got to put it all to the road. And I think that the reason I'm bringing this verse in here, if you were to see this car when it was on the trailer, for instance, very simple suspension setup. It simply wasn't there to transmit the power to the road. See, that's what suspensions do now. They help with cornering and all that thing. The suspension on this car, if you set it on the trailer and my dad was driving it over here, the whole body's going, and watch those old movies, and you'd see these things rocking back and forth. It's just so that it was comfortable enough and you could tolerate the ride enough. I mean, it was just rocking back and forth. I mean, if you were to, jump in and, you could just kind of, you could see what I mean. That's the kind of deal going on there. I'm not going to break it, I promise. It probably falls, collapses. But here's the thing. When you think about this passage in Matthew chapter 11, I want you to understand when he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." There is something about that he carries our load. That's what a suspension does as well. It carries the load of the vehicle, whatever car it is. I have a truck. Shocks are shot in the back. It rides better if you throw stuff in the back. My dad's truck, it's a little more punishing because it's even more stiff. It rides better with a trailer hooked up on it sometimes. But its idea is to keep the load there and help carry the load. Well, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." So I'm going to give you a few things. I just titled this one, "The Ride." That's why. It's the ride. Is it going to be floating along? Well, we'll talk about that. He says the first thing that I want you to grasp onto that I see in this verse is that I am invited to follow. I'm invited to follow. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." So this idea is it's an invitation. I'm invited to come and to follow him. That's the first thing that's there. And so that is this part of saying, he's talking to people who are without Christ. And we'll get into a little bit more as we go. But the first thing is that this is an invitation to follow him. Now, some of you will say, well, I already follow him, so I guess this verse isn't for me. But I kind of see it this way, that when we are weary and burdened, Jesus doesn't say, go to your friends. Jesus doesn't say, go to somebody else. Go see a counselor. Go see this person. Talk to your husband. Talk to your wife. The first thing he says is, come to me. And I think where we go wrong is we don't go to him first. It's not saying that, talking to your friends or talking to a counselor, please don't hear that I'm saying it's all bad. That's not the point. The first place you got to go is you got to go to Jesus when you're carrying a burden. And when you're carrying something and you're weary, you have to go to him. And when you're going to him, you are going with this sense of exhaustion. You see, when I'm, and I just think it's very picturesque, because now look at it on the other side of the cross. Here's Jesus carrying a massive wood plank on his shoulders, and he keeps falling. And Simon has to carry his cross for him. And he's carrying that load. And I just see this, you got to come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. And here he is the one, while he's on the way to the cross, going to be carrying our burden. And so even before he dies, he's almost giving you a picture of this, what he's going to do. He's going to carry your burden. How many of you have, in fact, I think it was very funny yesterday, there was an incident that, I shouldn't say an incident, it was just a funny little exchange that happened the other day, and I was asked, how many of you, I'll just call you out, Justin. Justin said, how many of you have wives that hand you something and say, hold this? Anybody? Will you hold this? Will you carry this for me? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. How many husbands here have something and say to your wife, here, carry this? Really, one of you. How do you get that? How does that work out, Andrew? Oh, I got a two. Okay. Well, see, the idea is, guys just don't, and I don't just say, hey, honey, here, carry this for me. Just, unless I'm smuggling a pop into the movie theater, but that's just a given, because I don't have a purse. And if I do have a purse, we have a problem. But I want her to carry something. She wants me to carry something. But when we come with Jesus, do we ever say to him, God, I have this burden. There is something burdened upon me. There's something I just can't take in my life. I need you to take this. Do you realize that he gladly accepts someone's burden and he says, okay, I'll carry it for you. But the problem is you got to ask him to carry it. And we don't. We try to carry this on our own, and we try to say, God, I can handle it. And believe you me, it's hard. It wears you down. And the reason he's saying weary and burdened, just think about it. If you're carrying a weight for a long period of time and you don't allow him to carry that burden, how weary you're going to be. So the first thing is he invites me to follow him. The second one is this, is that he invites me, I am invited to work with Jesus. Listen to what he says. I think some of us just leave it there. We leave it and say, okay, I can follow you, but listen to what he says. All of you, not some of you, take my yoke and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. And the reason he's inviting us to work with him is that he says, take my yoke. Now, a yoke is not something in the middle of an egg. That's a Y-O-L-K. But a yoke is something that ties two oxen together so that the work could be done by two oxen. And you put a yoke on, or even over one, and it would pull the plow. So in that day and age, they understood what a yoke was. They understood that that's the thing that transmitted the work to the plow, the power of the oxen to the plow. That's how it is. A wooden piece that would hang over their heads. You've probably seen pictures or things like that, or maybe you see a team of them, two ox, with it, and it would pull a plow or whatever. And the idea is that it would transmit and help transmit the work or whatever. That was part of the thing. And it would get things done. If you didn't have one of those, it made it really hard to pull a plow. It was frowned upon even in that culture to strap a plow to your child. So you couldn't really do that. You would put it on. And so that was kind of like our suspension thing, to carry the load. And so Jesus is saying, take my yoke. Take it. Because it's easy. It's burdensome, or burdenless, I should say. All of you, take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart. So this idea of take up my yoke means there's just this picture of, let me help you. You work with me. Take my yoke. And as he puts that on you, it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. And we walk with him. I see this picture of two oxen now, and I'm tied to him. I don't get a chance to do my own thing the way I want to do it, because I'm with him. And I'm strapped with him, and we're tied together, and we're getting some stuff done because he's with me. But too many times we want to take my yoke, my burden, and see if I can do it. And that is not the way that it should be done. He's saying, take my yoke. Take it. Work with me. Work with me. Don't fight me. Oxen were great animals to get work done, and they used horses as well, but they didn't have a lot of horses for work purposes like that there. They used ox because they're big, they're burly, and they could do the work. And they didn't have a mind of their own. The problem is that we are sheep. Sheep have a mind of their own. They're like a cat, at least in my world. I'm not criticizing cats because all God's creation. You can herd sheep, you can't herd cats. But a sheep, has a mind of its own. It's just going to kind of do whatever it does. It does whatever else anybody else does. And I think it's a fitting thing. But the problem is they're not very smart. And so there's this picture for me, at least in my head, because this is the way I work, that there's this yoke, and he's strapped it to sheep because that's what I am. And he's doing the work with me, and I'm just going to do whatever he wants to do. You see how much easier this would be if I just went with him and just did what he wanted me to do? Because now all of a sudden I'm not having to do all the work. I just got this thing working with me, and I'm strapped to him. It's he and I doing his thing, and we're going to get some stuff done. But too many times it's me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to shoulder this load. I'm a big, strong guy. I can do it. Look at these guys. No. Look at how hard I work. And I think sometimes God looks down and he says, well, how's that working out for you? You doing it all. Is that working for you? It's not. You wonder why you're weary. You wonder why you're burdened down. So the next one is this, is that I'm invited to learn. He says, take my yoke and do what? Learn. Learn from me. The call to discipleship, the call to follow, is not only a call to work with him, but it's also a call to learn, to dig into his word. He says, learn from me. It's so Christ-centered that it revolves around Jesus, and it begins to revolve around him. And we begin to work with him, and we begin to learn about him, and we do that through digging in his word, but it's an invitation to learn, because I'm gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. Now I'm going to transition a little bit for you to understand something. Jesus was talking to a group of people who were oppressed by the religious system of the day, which was all about works. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the other religious groups, and they were trying to oppress them. Let me give you an illustration for how many things that they had to do. The Pharisees spoke of 613 commandments, and their rulings involved a complicated system. Jesus appeals particularly to the Pharisaic tribes, the Pharisees and their disciples. Jesus promises to give rest to those who come to him, and thus speaks not only as wisdom does, but as God does to Moses in Exodus. And so there's this understanding that he's talking to these people who feel burdened by the religious system. How much am I supposed to work? How far can I walk on Sunday? How far? How do I, so you have 613 of these rules that you had to follow, and interpretation of them was somewhat complicated, and it was commonplace, and people are going, I don't get it. It's just so much. And it was a burden. So him saying, take my yoke, it's easy, it's light. It's something to give you humbleness and gentleness, because he's saying it's gentle and humble. It's not beat you over the head. But Jesus is saying, take my weight, take my yoke. You take your burden, you lay it on me. All these rules, all these systems, all that stuff is heavy. Revolve it around me. Now, does that mean that we say, oh, well, then that means I don't have to follow any of the rules? No. But you don't have to follow any of the rules to gain God's favor, to gain his love, because he loves you regardless. You don't have to do those things in order to receive him. But rather, there are some of the things that we do, and we want to follow him because I'm yoked together with him, walking with him, that I will do because I'm with him, and I want to do them, and I want to honor him. But I don't do them in order to gain his favor. I do them because I love him, not so that he will love us. Fine line, okay? But it's a distinction that we have to make. Some people will say, well, I'm not good enough to follow Jesus. Yeah, you know what? None of us were. You're in the same boat the rest of us were. Well, it doesn't matter what you did. Doesn't matter what you did. You got to take those burdens and you got to say, I got to learn from you. I got to follow you. I got to work with you. I got to learn from you. And the last one is this, is that he says, I promise you rest. I have a promise of rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, I've told you that I wanted to, someday would like to help restore the car, and I'm sure Dad and I have differing opinions on what you would do, but it doesn't really matter at this point because this is his car. He's done what he wants. But I actually, in a car like this, would love to have an airbag suspension because it's just cool, and it rides on a pillow of air, and it's just, you know, you can lower it down a little bit, and that kind of thing, because it would just be neat, but it wouldn't really look right on this car. So if I had a 67 Lincoln, you know, that would be cool, you know, just riding along on a pillow of air. And sometimes I think that I have to ride, when I want to ride with Christ, that I realize that I'm going to ride with him, and he is going to take me where he needs to take me. He's going to lead me. He's going to carry my load. And the bumps are still there. It's just that when I'm walking with him, maybe the bumps aren't as harsh. Maybe the bumps don't hurt as much. They still may be there. I mean, it got to the point where my wife didn't even want to drive that white car anymore. Success. Drive the minivan. Give me my car back, even though it was hers to start with. Okay, but the idea was, I liked it because it was the handling characteristics and all that was cool and blah, blah, blah. But when I want to get down to it and follow Christ and be honest about how to follow him and how to ride along in life with him and how he wants to carry my load, this doesn't make me apart from all of this process, that there's still pain. Because I look at this verse and people will say, well, you know, if you're suffering, you know, there's something wrong with you. No, because you look at verse 30 and somebody says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, and people will be like, oh, then all my problems will go away. He didn't say that your problems will go away. And taking it out of the context that my burden is easy, or my yoke is easy, my burden is light, is an easy thing for us to misconstrue. But he's talking about that the burden of crushing burden of legalism is not there anymore. The having to follow the rules is where he's talking about. You're going to experience, then he goes on in John and tells us, you will experience trouble. When you experience, you will. Why? Because you follow him. And it's okay. But remember, you're yoked together with him. And so he experiences the very same things that you're experiencing. And he helps you, lead you through this. He helps walk you through this. And so when you get into those rocky points of life, and you get to that point in your life where things get a little rough, you know, life starts looking like this, you know, where it's like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? I really shouldn't do that too much. Things are starting to fall off on the inside. A mouse will pop out of the ceiling. I really had intended to kind of jump on the back, but let's not do that. When life does that, he's still carrying the load. The problem we have is, no, give me that load back, God. I want that. I need to carry it. And God's saying, let me carry this. Jesus is saying, I want to carry this for you. Just come with me. Follow me. Follow me. How many of you will walk away, you'll walk out of here knowing you have a burden in your heart and you don't have it dealt with? You just walk away and think, no, I got this under control. I can handle it. And God's saying, no, you can't. But you're going to walk out and you're going to handle it on your own, and every bump in life you hit just makes it more obviously painful. And at some point, you're going to come to the point where you say, why did I not give this to him? Why must I carry this burden? I'm so tired. I'm so weary. I can't do it anymore. I remember my wife was pregnant with Evan. So this is in 2006. It was about February 2006. And we were at a pastors and wives retreat, and my wife and I had we had a friend that was here, did the music for us, and at the conference, did the conference music, and And I just remember at the end, I'll never forget this as long as I live. My wife, do you remember? Yeah. I just remember her weeping and breaking down and just saying, I can't do it anymore. We're working hard on the building. I'm spending 50, 60 hours a week over here trying to get this place built, trying to get done, feeling all that pressure in addition to all the other stuff going on. And she's just, I can't do it because she's here, she's pregnant, she's trying to put cove base in, or she's trying to sand drywall or some crazy thing that a pregnant woman shouldn't be doing, but she's doing anyway. And she's burned out, weary, worn. And I understood that. I get it. But on some levels, I did not connect with her because I was thinking to myself, suck it up, Nancy. I'm tired too. And for that, I'm sorry. And I tried to commiserate and pray with her and that and whatever. Switch into Pastor Ken. But when it came down to it, even in the midst of all that weariness, when I was weary, I didn't take that to God. Just sucked it up, did my own thing, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of thing, the American way. I'm a man, I can handle it. I couldn't handle it. And I needed to go to Him. And I needed to say, God, I can't do this. I can't. And all the while God would say, you're right, you can't. You just don't listen. You're stubborn. You won't listen to me. You have a burden that I want to carry, and you won't let me carry it. So now when things happen, and we're, you know, occasionally we're tired, and we get weary, I have learned from that experience to say, it doesn't matter what it is, God. It doesn't matter what's going on, what's going down. God, I just have to lay it at your feet, and I'm going to ride this thing out with you. It doesn't mean I understand everything. It doesn't mean I get it. I got to ride with you. It doesn't take the bumps away. The suspension doesn't magically remove bumps from the road. Just like trusting Jesus doesn't take every bump in the road out of the way, and everything is, you know, roses and lollipops and candy cane and all that kind of stuff. But rather I have someone that understands where I'm going, understands what He's doing, and is walking with me. And He's saying, stick with me, stick with me. I'll take you where we need to go. I'll take you. Okay. I don't get it, but okay. That's the hardest place to get to. The hardest place to get to. And Jesus is calling us to come to Him. Come to Him. Come to Him and trust Him in His power. Come to Him and trust what He wants to do. Come to Him and say, God, I need you to begin to revive in me something that you want to do. I want you to begin to do something amazing in me. I want you to begin to change my heart. I want you to begin to help me to come to you and learn. Maybe I'm not learning much. I'm not spending time in your word. I'm just trying to go along Sunday to Sunday. Ken, give me a little nugget. Okay, that'll be something I can take home. File away for later. And Jesus is saying, come, lay your burdens down. Lay them down. I'll take them. Did you ever thought about that? He's the only person in human history who has ever said, I'll take your burden. I'll take it for you so that you don't have to. He took our punishment that we don't have to. He took the whippings and the beatings that we didn't have to. He took a crucifixion so that we don't have to. And here He is saying, you got a burden? You're weary? I'll take it. Yoke up with me. Just tie yourself to me. I'll give you rest. This rest is eternal. He's talking eternity-wise. It's the future. He's saying sometime in the future you will find your rest. You will find the rest. You don't have to keep working to find the rest. You walk with me and in my ways and in my teaching. You learn from me, you'll find the rest. Here, you may still have trouble, you'll still have trials, but I'm with you. I'm walking with you. You will have rest. I think it's a great promise. And of course, that rest that we know is heaven. It's what Jesus promises to us. He tells us, I'm going away to prepare a place. If it were not so, I wouldn't have told you that. If it's not there, then he's a liar. And I'm convinced. It doesn't matter if I'm convinced or not. It's there because he said it's there. I don't have to be convinced whether heaven's real or not. It's real because he said it's real. It's a place he's provided. It's a place where we can find ultimate rest in the midst of our troubles. Let him do the work. Let him do it. You just follow him. A suspension's job is to carry the load and to transmit however the power is to the ground, and also wherever the car is going, that's going to go too. It all helps work with it. And so when Jesus is calling you to him, he's saying, take it on. Let me take it. And where I lead, will you follow? Where I go, will you go? Are we willing to lay that down before him today? Let's pray. God, thank you that we can be here today. And God, as we prepare